Okay. If you would turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 13. We're going to start in verse 24 tonight. If you remember from last time, Jesus is teaching in parables. And we say, I don't know, we say he teaches, I've always heard this said this way, and I've said it myself, and I just did, actually. Say he's teaching in parables, but the people that he's giving these parables to don't have a clue what they mean. At least the multitudes don't. Now, his disciples, he does take time to explain it to them, but to the multitudes he doesn't. Every time we've seen this in this chapter, we see it in the other three Gospels, the same story. Basically, he says, if you have an ear to hear, you'll hear it. And if not, then you won't. And to have an ear to hear these things, you have to be a child of God. And if you notice, a lot of times, even as children of God, we don't always understand everything the Lord tells us, do we? It's not always for us. People try to force things. And especially today in the society we live in, where everybody thinks they get to know everything. You don't have to know everything. There are some things that God has kept secret for a purpose, and there are things that he's kept secret to certain people or groups of people for a reason, his reason, whatever that is. We know, just like the mystery of the church that Paul talks about in Ephesians. It's not for everybody. If you're not a member of one of the Lord's churches, you're probably not going to understand the doctrine of the church. If you do understand it and you're still not a member of one of the Lord's churches, then you're in rebellion. It's that simple. But as far as the parables go, and this chapter is full of parables. One of the first song we just sang had to do with agricultural things, the harvest, the growing and the harvest and all that, and that's what most of these parables are about. He's talking about things concerning the kingdom, and tonight that's what we're going to look at is the parables that he speaks of tonight are starting in verse 24, going to be concerning the kingdom, his kingdom. Last time we saw the parable of the sower, and he explained that one to his disciples. He's going to give some more examples of agricultural things, some things that are similar to what we studied last time. And again, he will stop and he will explain these things to his disciples without the multitude there. They go into a house and he begins to explain things to them. And he asks them at one point, do you understand what I'm saying? And they said yes. They understood. Other times, especially when he's in his ministry, he would throw things out there to his disciples and tell them about prophecy about him leaving them. And we see that, and they act like they don't understand it, but at the same time, you got to wonder, were they purposely not understanding it? Because they didn't want him to leave. It's just like here in this life, when you see someone who is on their deathbed and they're sick, and there are times coming, but sometimes we don't want them to leave, and we live in denial during that time and think, well, they're going to live forever, and especially someone that's been around us a long time, whether a spouse or a parent or a grandparent or somebody we're close to. We don't want to lose them, and yet their days are obviously numbered. It's kind of like the way they were with him. They knew from the prophecies that he gave them that his time was short, but they wanted him to be there forever. And not necessarily anything wrong with that way of thinking, but it's not always what God intends to happen. Now to our study in Matthew chapter 13, verse 24. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. What a wicked thing to do, isn't it? You know, why would you do that? You know, that's just out of the meanness of your heart. You people, this man sows his field, says sowed good seed in his field, and while everybody was asleep one night, somebody went out there and sowed a bunch of tares, a bunch of bad seed. That would take just a wicked person to do something like that. But yet there are people out there that would do that. And he says, but when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. And oftentimes, I can tell you from my experience on the farm, we used to plant wheat. We raised it for silage for our milk cows, and we planted wheat, and then oftentimes for grazing purposes, because we didn't raise the wheat to harvest for the seeds. We raised it for silage for green chop. To add more to it, we would, in the fertilizer that we spread, we would put ryegrass seeds, and ryegrass is a tare. It produces, it'll grow and it will look very similar to the wheat until the final stages, and then you realize, hey, doesn't have the seed head that the wheat does. And then we would cut it all at the same time, of course, and it was good for the cows to eat in that way, but it's not any good for human consumption. If you're wanting to harvest it to eat, the fruit of it, the ryegrass seed is very tiny and has very little good to it, other than to reseed itself. That's about all it's good for. And like I said, you could tell when the seed head would come out, you could tell pretty quick they weren't the same. The leaves looked very similar, not exactly. If you got to where if you had a good eye and you were used to raising those things, you could tell the difference. But the common person could walk out there and couldn't tell the difference until the seed head come out. Same way, that's kind of what he's talking about here. That when the blades of the whatever he planted here came out, you could tell a difference, and it brought forth fruit. In other words, when it produced the grain, you could tell a difference. He says, then appeared the tares also, so you could easily tell the difference. And what they did in their day, as we'll see here in a moment, they would harvest or rip out the tares and burn them after they harvested the grain. That way you didn't tear out the grain. And if you do it too quickly, it's just like if you've ever raised a garden and you pull weeds in your garden, you have to be careful or you'll pull out the roots of the good plants also. And so that's the purpose of what they do here. You throw the weeds out and either throw them outside the garden, or some people, we've thrown them, just throw them in the row between the plants, and then eventually they dry out and die. Or some people will even throw them outside the garden and actually burn them. And then you can take the ashes and you can spread it back into the dirt, and it produces fertilizer. Something bad turns into something good. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, dost not thou sow good seed in the field? From whence then hath it tares? They knew he sowed good seed. They were there when he done it, and they may have even had a hand in helping him do it. So where did these tares come from? Remember, it happened at night when they were all asleep, and the one who done it left and went on his way. That's what it tells us in verse 25. But he said, Nay, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. So, again, you don't want to pull the tares out at the wrong time, because if you do, you're going to pull the good stuff up with it. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Again, they gather the reapers when they come in. They're going to take out the tares first, and it's a burdensome thing, because they all grow up together in the same ground and the same right next to each other. It takes time to go in there and pull the tares out first. But that's what they did, and they burned them. Now, he doesn't explain this here, does he? He will in a moment. We'll get to that. But he doesn't explain that here, what this is talking about. But just remember, he's talking about the kingdom of heaven, not the world as a whole, but the kingdom of heaven, his kingdom. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. Another parable of the kingdom, he says. He likens the kingdom of heaven as a grain of mustard seed. In other words, it's very small, the smallest of small when it starts out. But then it becomes the greatest of the greatest, doesn't it? Another parable spake he unto them, the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till the whole was leavened. This is not necessarily agricultural terms here. This is baking terms, if you want to get down to it. This woman puts a little bit of leaven. What does Paul tell us? A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. You put a little bit of leaven in a barrel of wheat, of flour, and eventually it'll take over, and the whole barrel will be full of leaven. It'll make what we consider good bread. They had unleavened bread back then. We eat leavened bread today, unless it's for the Lord's Supper, then we use unleavened bread. Or if you ever have an opportunity to eat flat bread or a tortilla or something like that, it's unleavened. It always amazes me how unleavened bread costs more than leavened bread does. You'd think it would be the other way around, but it's not. It's like it's a delicacy or something, and it shouldn't be. Now, notice there's 3 parables he's mentioned here. He's presented to the people. None of them has he explained yet. And because we've read these before, we sort of know what they're about. For one, he does say at the beginning of each one, the kingdom of heaven is like unto whatever he's talking about here. So he's talking about the kingdom of heaven. So that should be a key to those listening, but it's not. Remember, these multitudes that followed him, there's no evidence that the vast majority of them were ever saved. Matter of fact, when he began, when he taught, when he was doing, remember when he was doing all the miracles, the healings and the casting out demons and raising people from the dead and those types of things, the multitude was there, and they were all over that. They come to see the show. But when he began to teach doctrine, they left. They couldn't handle it. Now, they're in amazement. They hear these parables. They don't know what to think. What in the world is he talking about? And in their kind of in their excitement, they're thinking he's about to tell us, but he doesn't. The kingdom of heaven, they understand. They're Jews, remember. They know a little bit about the kingdom of heaven, or they should. They're Jews. They've been raised Jews. They've been raised on the teachings from the temple and the synagogues. They've heard the kingdom of heaven mentioned. If they've been with him for very long, they heard John the Baptist talk about the kingdom of heaven, didn't they? Now, I'm not saying all of the people in the multitudes were not saved. So we have no idea of knowing that how many is the issue there. We don't have a clue, but it appears as though the vast majority of them probably weren't saved, at least not at this point in time. Maybe later. But he's talking about the kingdom of heaven. Now, he says in verse 34, all these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable spake he not unto them. That's all he had to say to them, was in parables. Now, are these all of the parables? I don't think so. John tells us that there was much more that he said and did that could not be recorded because there wasn't a book big enough to hold it all. So probably this was not. This is just a sampling of what he preached to them. Verse 35, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. Again, he's speaking to the Jews here. These are things that they don't understand because even their own priests didn't understand them. They didn't teach them because they didn't understand them. But they should have understood them because they had the Word of God. And he is speaking on things that they understand, or they should understand, as far as raising wheat and crops and making bread. They should understand those things. But how does it apply to the kingdom of heaven? That's what they don't understand. Now he begins to explain things. Verse 36, then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came unto him, saying, declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. So even his disciples at this point in time don't really understand it, but he is willing to explain it to them. Notice he runs the multitude off. He sent them away. They're going to a house, some say probably to have a meal. Maybe it's getting close to evening and it's time to get ready for bed. It seems as though in Jesus' ministry, when his disciples, when it's evening time and it's time for their evening meal, they gather in a house somewhere and have their meal and they sit around and talk about these things. It seems like that's what he's doing here. They ask him to tell them the meaning of the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said unto them, he that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. Who is that? Himself, Jesus Christ. He is the one who sows the good seed. What good seed did he sow? He's talking about his people. Remember he's talking about the kingdom of heaven here. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. So now we're beginning to see what he's talking about. And you begin to see that all three of those parables we just talked about are tied together. They're not separate. He's told them in separate tellings, but they're tied together in their meaning. The field is the world. The good seed, remember the householder, he sowed good seed. And he didn't sow any tares. He sowed good seed. Same way in this world. The Lord has sowed good seed. He has his children placed where he wants them in this world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. Now, one thing I will bring out here also is, notice he doesn't say the church. He says the kingdom. There's a difference. But the tares are the children of the wicked one. They're the children of Satan. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. We see right away that's who he's talking about. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. What happens at the end of the world? We've studied that before in Revelation. Remember the judgment that takes place at the end of the millennial reign, when everyone is called out of hell that's in hell, and all those who are on the earth at that time that are not saved are called before the Lord. And then also all those that are saved are called there too. But remember the telling of the sheep and the goats? Goats can never be sheep, can they? And sheep can never be goats. So there are those who are always tares. Tares can't be wheat, can they? And wheat can't be tares. The harvest is the end of the world. What does he mean? That means the judgment. At the end of the world, there comes the judgment. And the reapers are the angels. The angels are the ones who gather everybody together. And what happens? As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be at the end of the world. What do we know about the end of the world? At the end of the judgment, they're cast into the lake of fire, are they not? To burn forever. Unlike tares that we pull out of our crops that just burn up into ash, they're not going to burn up. They're going to burn, but they're not going to go away. It's going to be an eternal flame, it says. And, as therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity. Now, if you look at the nation of Israel here, there are those, Paul said there are those who are of Israel, and there are those who are in Israel that are not of Israel. That's not a direct quote, but it's close. That's what he's saying. That's what he means. There are those, even if we see it today, there are those who claim to be of the nation of Israel. They claim to be of God's kingdom, Israel, but they're not, are they? They're not saved. They're not. They may be of the bloodline of Abraham. It's been that way for since their beginning. There were people in the Old Testament that were part of the nation of Israel who were of the bloodline. There were some that were even made it to the priesthood, wasn't there? That weren't saved. And there's going to be those during the tribulation that are not going to be called out, are they? They're going to be part of the nation of Israel. Look over there now. Look how wicked the nation of Israel is now. It's over there. The people that call themselves Israel over there now. They may be of the bloodline, but are they God's people? There's a difference between God's nation, the nation of Israel, and those who claim to be. And maybe a good example here is look at the church. You have people who are members of the Lord's churches. Some are wheat and some are tares, aren't they? You have some who will never be saved. They've made false professions. They've been baptized. They participate in church functions. They may even pastor a church. They may even be a deacon. They may be a song leader. They may be a Sunday school teacher. They may be a piano player. But they've never been saved. They've been, whether it was by Satan or by their own imagination, they've been tricked into thinking they are. Maybe they're in denial. Maybe because, well, mom and dad were, so that makes me saved too. There's people that actually think that. People in Baptist churches that actually think that because their parents were faithful members, that made them a candidate for membership. Same way with the nation of Israel. There are those who are in the nation of Israel that are saved, those who are not. And it'll be that way when the Lord comes back. When he, during the tribulation, when he calls them back to the land, the final group comes over there, and they gather together and begin to be persecuted by the people of the world. There's going to be, I believe there's going to be Jews that are going to persecute their own people, because they're going to claim to be, the Lord is going to save them. Remember, he saves a nation in a day. They're going to be saved, yet there's going to be that group, just like in the Old Testament and in Jesus' day, there's going to be that group of Jews that think they're better than everybody else, and that they're the true nation of Israel, and yet they're not. And the Lord will separate them. It goes back to the same what I was saying with the church, the same way with the church. When the time comes, the Lord's going to pull out the true members of his bride, and those that were not true, whether it was because they were not saved or it was because they weren't faithful, whichever it is, he'll separate them out, and there'll be a group, a remnant, if you will, that will go with him into the bride chamber, and there'll be those that will be left out with the guest, or in hell, one of the two. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now, we've studied this before, this phrase, wailing and gnashing of teeth. That can mean only one thing. That means they went to hell. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. Now he goes on with some more parables of the kingdom. Now, I think I said last time we were going to do this in two lessons, and I'm going to stop there for tonight. We're going to pick back up with this. Well, yeah, we're going to stop there for tonight. He goes on with some more parables on the kingdom, but just remember, things are not always what they seem in this life. People are not always what they seem. Just because someone says they're a Christian doesn't mean they are. Just because somebody says they're part of the nation of Israel, they don't always know what they're talking about, do they? There's people, there's this false doctrine out there that's referred to as the replacement theology, and people claim the church is taking the place of Israel. That's a huge false doctrine. That's a huge red flag right there when somebody mentions that. They have no proof of that. There's no scripture in the Bible that tells that. There's plenty of evidence in the scripture, however, that tells us that the two are separate. And even when it comes time when we enter eternity, there is a difference. Yes, the bride will live with the king. His wife will live with the king in the new city of Jerusalem, in the land of Israel at that day. But she is not Israel. The nation of Israel is going to rule and reign with Christ, or not with Christ, but they're under Christ. They're going to have authority over other nations. It tells us that. He prophesied that to them, that there was going to come a point in time where they were going to rule over other nations. That time comes, they'll get a taste of it during the millennium, I believe. But it'll be full blown when we get to eternity and things settle down on the new earth and the new city of Jerusalem and all that. When we enter eternity. And those are the things that he's talking about here. And it'll be when he gets to verse 51, Jesus said unto his disciples, have ye understood all these things? And they say, Yea, Lord. So apparently they understood these things. How well they understood them, it doesn't really tell us. But we see evidence after this point in time that it appears as though they didn't fully understand what he was talking about, at least not until after his resurrection. And then you begin to see where he opens their eyes and their understanding, and things begin to click in their mind. They say, oh, that's what he was talking about. Now we understand. And even some of them, some of the things he taught them didn't really come to their understanding until the Holy Ghost came on the day of Pentecost. Then they really began to understand things as far as concerning the church especially, and even the nation of Israel. Are the apostles going to be part of the nation of Israel? They were all Jews and saved. No. Remember, they're the first members of the church. So they're not members of the nation of Israel any longer. They're members of the Lord's church, of his bride. Again, there are those who misunderstand that, but that's what the Scripture tells us. Paul said, some will throw out there that Paul said that, well, he was a Jew of the Jews. You know, he was a Jew. He was proud of the fact that he was of the nation of Israel, proud of being a Jew, but yet he understood that was speaking on physical things and not spiritual. Paul, again, another member of the Lord's bride. We see that. So we'll stop there for today, and we'll pick back up with verse 44 next